Today we will be considering the topic strength in unexpected places. Our scripture reading is from Isaiah 40:29. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. There once was a mother named Sarah who was known for her hardworking spirit. She had 2 young children, a 6-year-old boy named Ethan and a 4-year-old girl named Lily. Sarah's days were filled with the hustle of motherhood, preparing meals, cleaning the house, caring for her children, and trying her best to be present for them while balancing the demands of a full-time job. She was a dedicated worker, often staying late at the office just to meet deadlines and make ends meet. But as time went on, Sarah began to feel overwhelmed. The weight of responsibility pressed on her every day. Her body felt tired, her mind constantly raced with worries, and her heart, though full of love for her family, began to feel drained. She would wake up in the morning already exhausted, knowing that another long day awaited her. She loved her children more than anything in the world, but sometimes she felt like she had nothing left to give. One evening, after tucking Ethan and Lily into bed, Sarah sat down on the couch, her body aching from the day's work. Her head felt heavy, and all she wanted to do was close her eyes and escape for just a moment. But she knew she couldn't. She had to finish a project for work that was due the next morning. She sighed deeply, her hands trembling as she picked up her phone to check her emails one last time. The pressure seemed endless, and in that moment, Sarah felt utterly weak. As she sat there in silence, her thoughts shifted to her faith. She had always believed that God was with her, but tonight she wasn't sure how much strength she had left to give. She whispered a simple prayer, barely able to muster the words, "God, I'm so tired. Please help me. Give me strength to keep going." She closed her eyes for a moment, and in the quiet of her living room, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't know what would come next, but in her heart, she believed that God would somehow provide what she needed. And so she went to bed, trusting that somehow she would make it through. The next morning, Sarah awoke to the sound of her alarm blaring. It was early and she felt like she hadn't slept enough. But as she stretched and got out of bed, something was different. There was a small glimmer of energy that she hadn't felt in a while. It wasn't a sudden surge of power, but a quiet, unexplainable strength. As she prepared breakfast for Ethan and Lily, she noticed something else, a knock at the door. Surprised, she opened it to find her neighbor, Karen, standing there with a warm smile on her face. "Good morning, Sarah," Karen greeted her cheerfully. "I was just about to head to the store, and I thought I'd ask if you needed anything. I know you've been working hard lately, and I wanted to help out however I could." Sarah smiled gratefully, though she didn't quite understand. She hadn't shared her struggles with Karen, but somehow her neighbor seemed to know. "That's so kind of you, Karen," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "Actually, if you don't mind, could you watch the kids for just a little while? I've got a deadline today, and I could really use some extra time to finish up." "Of course," Karen said without hesitation. "I'd be happy to help. I've got it covered. You just focus on your work." Sarah couldn't believe it. She had been struggling to balance everything, but in that moment, God had sent her exactly the help she needed. It wasn't a miracle that turned her life upside down, but it was something even better, an act of kindness from a friend who saw her need and stepped in without Sarah even having to ask. As Sarah worked that day, she felt a renewed sense of strength. The project that had seemed impossible to finish suddenly became manageable, and her focus improved. Karen kept the kids entertained, making them lunch and even bringing over a little surprise. Sarah's favorite coffee, just to brighten her day. By the time Sarah finished her work, it was as if the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. That evening, as Sarah sat down with her children for dinner, she felt something profound in her heart. She had been so focused on what she couldn't do, how tired she was, and how much was expected of her, that she had failed to see the ways God was already providing. The help from her friend Karen, the quiet strength she had felt earlier that morning, and even the love and joy of her children, those were all gifts from God, showing her that He was with her every step of the way. She remembered the scripture she had read the night before, Isaiah 40:29. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. In that moment, she realized that God hadn't just given her strength in the way she expected. He had provided in ways she hadn't anticipated. The strength came through the people around her, the moments of peace in her heart, and the subtle yet profound reminder that she wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself reflecting on that moment of prayer and the unexpected help that followed. She learned that sometimes God's strength doesn't always come in grand displays, but in the quiet moments of support from friends, family, and even the simple strength to keep going when everything seems too much. It reminded her that when she felt weak, she could always turn to God for strength, knowing He would always be there, in both big and small ways. As Sarah continued to navigate the challenges of motherhood and work, she no longer felt as overwhelmed by the demands of life. Instead, she found herself more open to the ways God was working in her life, trusting that He would continue to provide the strength she needed just when she needed it most. Reflection. When we feel weak or weary, it's easy to get caught up in the pressures of life. We can feel as though we have to do everything on our own, but the truth is, God is always with us. He gives us strength in ways we might not expect, through the kindness of others, through moments of peace, and through His quiet presence in our hearts. When you feel weak, ask God for strength and trust that He will provide. He never fails to uplift us in both expected and unexpected ways. And remember, sometimes the strength you need may come in the form of a helping hand, a friendly smile, or even a quiet moment of rest. Don't be afraid to lean on others, and know that God's provision is always at work in your life. Let us all remember to trust in God's promise, knowing that He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. He will never leave us, and He will always lift us up when we turn to Him.